Today, what's changing in 2021? Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, at the turn of the new year, there will be a number of significant changes, both to government support and some factors that will impact the broader economy. So I thought today we would just go through some of the main ones. I guess the first thing to look at is JobKeeper, which of course was the economic stimulus designed to keep workers in jobs amid the virus. And it will be further cut on January the 4th, and it will disappear completely on March the 28th, 2021, unless things change. From January the 4th until March the 28th, the payment will drop from $1,200 to $1,000 for full-time workers, and from $750 to $650 per fortnight for part-time employees, after, of course, having been cut from $1,500 a fortnight back in September. The JobKeeper stimulus was introduced to provide support for businesses who face financial losses, though we do note that a lot of the money went to big businesses in the top end of town and enabled them to pay significant bonuses to executives, as well as report very strong profits. Down in SME land, it's been much less effective. Secondly, Job Seeker, which was created to support people who suddenly found themselves out of work and replace New Start allowance, is also due for a change. Job Seeker payment recipients and recipients for other eligible payments receive the coronavirus supplement on top of their base rate of payment. It was paid an initial rate of $550 per fortnight until September the 24th. Then it was extended at a rate of $250 per fortnight until the December 31st deadline. And from January the 1st to March the 31st, the coronavirus supplement will continue to be paid, but at a rate of $150 per fortnight. Now, there is still, of course, a big debate about what the long-term level of support should be. It's currently too low, and we do expect to see some changes here, although the government will be forced dragging and screaming to make those changes. In fact, more broadly, I'd say that the government is trying to drive support back into the private sector. For example, as part of the 2020-21 budget, the government announced a new incentive for businesses to employ additional young job seekers called the JobMaker Hiring Credit. The JobMaker Hiring Credit, administered by the ATO, will give $200 a week to employers who hire anyone aged 16 to 30, and $100 for any worker aged 30 to 35. Eligible employers will have had access to a JobMaker Hiring Credit for each new job they created over the 12 months from October the 7th, 2020, and employers will be able to make claims quarterly commencing in February 2021. Now, I would say there that may certainly help some younger people to get work, but it does nothing to address the larger number of people who are older and out of work. And in fact, it may force some changes where older people are pushed out while people employ new, younger employees. Now, there will also be a number of concessions available in 2021 for certain visa holders impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Department of Home Affairs indicated it will implement a concession for certain family visa applicants who applied for their visas offshore, then came to Australia and are stuck in Australia due to border closures. The COVID-19 concession period commences from the 1st of February 2020 and is an interim arrangement. Usually such applicants would need to be offshore in order to have their visas granted. However, the concession will now allow affected applicants to have their visas to be granted while they are in Australia. Meanwhile, visa applications for the Global Talent Visa has been tripled to assist business sponsors in attracting high-caliber individuals with specialist skills to Australia, with a pathway to Australian permanent residence. A range of welfare recipients, including pensioners and disability carers, receive the first of two $250 cash payments in December, while the other half will come through in March 2021. The incentive for the elderly and carers is part of the government's economic support payments. Those eligible for the money include aged and disability pensioners, veterans, people on carer payments, and family tax benefit recipients. Commonwealth senior health card holders and pensioner concession card holders are also eligible to receive the payment. And there is also an extra tax boost when we file our tax return in 2021. Early tax cuts were implemented in October 2020 with a tax relief plan announced in the budget. Workers have been receiving half of their early tax cuts in their pay, while the second half of the tax relief will come mid-year when Aussies do their next tax return. The lump sum employees will get in their tax return will be the backdated amount from July the 1st, 2020, which is about 4 to 5 months' worth of tax cash. Now turning to bankruptcies, there were temporary changes to debt relief and bankruptcies brought in March, and they will cease on Friday with the bankruptcy threshold lifted. On 24th of March this year, the federal government announced a series of changes to bankruptcy laws as part of its wider economic responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. Among the temporary changes implemented for personal bankruptcy were an increase in the debt threshold from $5,000 to $20,000, which enables creditors to apply for a bankruptcy notice. An increase in the time frame for a debtor to respond to a bankruptcy notice from 21 days to 6 months, and an increase in the temporary debt protection period available to debtors from 21 days to 6 months. As of this Friday, the 1st of January 2021, those temporary changes will cease. However, an amendment has been made to adjust the bankruptcy threshold so that the minimum amount of debt that can trigger a bankruptcy is $10,000. That's down from the temporary amount of $20,000 and double the pre-COVID level of $5,000. Further, the amount of time an individual has to respond to a bankruptcy notice is 21 days, reduced from 6 months, and temporary debt protection will be allowed for 21 days, and temporary debt protection will allow for 21 days relief from creditors instead of 6 months. The government amended the bankruptcy regulations to adjust the threshold for petitioning bankruptcy to $10,000 or more. And it was said that this was done following consultation with stakeholders, including insolvency practitioners, industry and member associations, and consumer advocates. Speaking of the changes, Attorney General Christian Porter said the new permanent $10,000 threshold will ensure that Australians in financial difficulty are not made bankrupt over relatively small amounts of debt. This also accounts for the changing value of money since the $5,000 threshold was last increased back in 2010, as well as changes to debt levels since then. And there are also new insolvency processes available for eligible small businesses from Friday. Earlier this month, Parliament passed reforms to the insolvency framework that aims to keep businesses in business and more Australians in jobs, according to Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. The reforms, which were announced by the government as part of the 2021 budget, introduces a new simplified debt restructuring process that can be accessed by small businesses experiencing distress. It draws on key features of the Chapter 11 bankruptcy model used in the US and applies to incorporated businesses with liabilities of less than $1 million. That's estimated to cover around 76% of businesses subject to insolvencies, 98% of whom have less than 20 employees. It aims to amend the insolvency system to, quote, better support small businesses dealing with the economic impact of COVID-19, according to the Treasurer. Speaking after legislation passed in Parliament, Frydenberg stated by moving from a rigid one-size-fits-all creditor in possession model to a more flexible debtor in possession model, eligible small businesses can restructure their existing debts while remaining in control of their business. A new simplified liquidation path will also be introduced to allow faster and lower cost liquidation, including increasing returns for creditors and employees. Complementary measures to enable more practitioners to enter the profession are also being implemented. Together, these measures will reduce costs, cut red tape, and ultimately help more small businesses to recover from the COVID-19 crisis. Well, that's probably all good and well, but I would make the point that many small businesses are not incorporated, and they have much more limited protections, and many of them, of course, also have a mortgage which supports their business as well as it being their place of main residence. So I think we're going to see a considerable rise in the number of insolvencies in the months ahead. And remember that the total count over the last few months has been way lower than normal. And many insolvency practitioners that I speak with do say that they do expect a rush to the exit over the next few months. We haven't yet seen the worst of the insolvencies. Elsewhere, the Australian government has made mental health and suicide prevention a national priority, with an unprecedented $5.7 billion to be spent on mental health in 2021. The number of Medicare-funded psychological services doubled in 2020 from 10 to 20 through the Better Access Initiative, which was announced in the 2020 budget. The government also announced subsidised telehealth care services, including for mental health services, which will be extended until the end of March 2021. And there was also more funding provided to Lifeline, Headspace, Beyond Blue, and Kids Helpline. These are very critical support mechanisms because, of course, many more people are feeling the pressure. Next, on travel restrictions, while some borders will stay firmly closed, domestic and international travel is expected to gradually continue to reopen as the pandemic eases and the vaccines roll out through the next few months. Of course, nobody quite knows how soon that's going to happen. A forced 2-week quarantine is still in place for international travellers coming into Australia, as well as for some states across the country, but this will likely ease as numbers go down, if they go down. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce has previously said mandatory vaccines will be a necessity for international airline travel. We're looking to changing our terms and conditions to say that for international travellers that we will ask people to have the vaccine before they get on the aircraft, he said in a recent interview. Overseas travellers may have to produce a vaccine certificate before boarding their flight to Australia. And, of course, later the New South Wales government has announced that stamp duty in New South Wales could be a thing of the past from mid-2021. They propose a change, which was announced in the New South Wales budget, that would mean stamp duty would be replaced with an annual land tax on new property transactions. Home buyers would have a choice between paying a one-off stamp duty bill or an annual property tax. And first-time buyers would get an extra incentive with a grant worth up to $25,000 under the proposed overhaul, instead of an exemption from stamp duty. And that change could kick in from the second half of 2021, but watch this space, and there is the big question of how they're going to fill the gap from the stamp duty takings that they are currently receiving. And if I were buying a property in New South Wales, I'd think very carefully before switching to a land tax, bearing in mind that you have to pay every year, and therefore if you stay in the same property for a long period of time, you end up probably paying quite a lot more, which of course increase the costs of the property over time. So in conclusion, many changes coming in. The overall level of support for households is set to decline, whilst the whole question of bankruptcies, and particularly small business bankruptcies, is likely to increase. And of course the virus is still raging, and we have more cases, of course, in Greater Sydney at the moment. So this ain't over yet, and I would expect more government support to appear later in the year as the ongoing issues continue to hit the economy. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.